It's fascinating how quickly the online landscape shifts, isn't it?
Hmm.
Someone can be trending for one thing today and, well, something completely different tomorrow. Public perception online is just this constantly evolving beast.
Yeah, it really is.
And that's exactly what we're diving into today.
We are taking a deep look at the online presence of Trisha Paytas. And our listeners sent in a really interesting mix of stuff, news reports, journalistic takes,
Uh-huh.
a very lively Reddit thread, let's say,
Huh, okay.
and even an academic thesis looking at online celebrity through her specifically.
Right, a full spectrum. You've got the formal reporting, the raw, unfiltered opinions online, and then academia trying to make sense of it all.
Exactly.
So our goal today is to really try and dissect the trajectory of Trisha Paytas' career online. We want to understand, how they built their platform, navigate through all the controversies, and there are quite a few, and sort of see where things stand now, all while keeping in mind these different, sometimes clashing viewpoints from the sources.
Okay, so where do we even start with all this?
Well, a logical place, maybe, and something a couple of sources mentioned, is looking at their early days, like involvement in entertainment before they were this huge online figure.
Ah, right.
The Music Times article reminds us Paytas actually popped up in music videos for some pretty big names. We're talking Amy Winehouse, Eminem, the All-American Rejects.
Wow, I'd completely forgotten about that. So they were already kind of orbiting that world.
Seems like it. They had this initial exposure, yeah. And then, according to that same article, 2014 is when they started doing their own music stuff, initially covers.
Okay.
Like Santa Baby, A Little Less Conversation, that kind of thing. It's interesting seeing those early steps.
Yeah, laying the groundwork.
And that music thing seemed to get more attention with their cover of Shallow, from A Star is Born.
Oh, and what's interesting, as the Music Times notes, is Paytas being very, Paytas about it, claiming their version was better than Lady Gaga's.
Huh. That definitely sounds on brand. Bold statement.
Makes you wonder, was it just for attention, or it certainly got people talking?
Yeah, it fits a pattern, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Never shy about making a splash. Okay, so this brings us, inevitably, to the controversies. This is probably what Paytas is most known for, right?
Arguably, yeah.
Yeah.
And this is where that academic thesis, Beyond Cancel Culture, Digital Vigilantism Toward YouTube Shamelelebrity Trisha Paytas, gives us a really interesting lens.
Okay.
It introduces this idea of shamelelebrity.
Shamelelebrity, what's the thinking there?
Well, the thesis basically argues that sometimes controversial behavior isn't just a mistake, it can be like a deliberate tactic. In the online world, where everyone's fighting for clicks and views the attention economy, right?
Yeah.
Being controversial can be a calculated way to get noticed.
So stir things up to stay relevant.
That's the theory. And the thesis argues that Paytas doing this shamelelebrity thing eventually led to what it calls digital vigilantism on YouTube, especially after early attempts to cancel them didn't really stick.
Okay, failed cancellations leading to digital vigilantism. What does the thesis mean by that term?
So digital vigilantism here means like a more ongoing, coordinated online pushback against things someone's done or said.
Right.
It's more than just a quick burst of anger. It's people working together online to, name and shame, expose what they see as wrongdoings.
Gotcha. So it's sustained scrutiny.
Exactly. And this ties right into that Reddit thread from H3H3 Productions. That thread seems like a perfect example of this digital vigilantism happening, specifically about Paytas and the Frenemies podcast with Ethan Klein. What jumped out at you from reading that?
What really struck me was this strong feeling about a double standard. People in the thread listed all these alleged examples of harassment and abuse towards Ethan and Gila Klein, and they kept saying, look, if this stuff like comparing unsolicited nudes or making OnlyFans content about them without consent, if that had been done to Trisha, the internet would have exploded.
That's a really powerful point they're making there, a sense of unequal consequences.
Yeah, definitely a feeling that Paytas wasn't being held to the same standard.
And the comments really show this frustration. Some people were saying problematic behavior got excused too often, like, oh, that's just their chaotic personality.
Right. Framed as entertainment almost.
Yeah, or even enabled by some fans. The thread mentions comments supporting the allegations got deleted, which suggests, lots of people in that community were aware of these issues.
Makes you think about those parasocial relationships, how they can maybe skew how people see things like accountability.
For sure. And the thread gets really specific about that time period, too. There's this claim that Ethan was uncomfortable being alone with Paytas, so Dan was always there, like a chaperone.
Yeah, that was mentioned a few times. And users talked about what they saw as a reputation reversal since then, and were pretty critical of fans they thought were enabling harmful behavior. It's a very stark picture.
And it wasn't just about frenemies, right? People in the thread were bringing up all sorts of past stuff.
Oh, yeah. Driving a car into a house, the IDF roleplay TikToks, allegations about adult content involving family members, claims about lying about infertility. It was a long list.
Wow.
Someone even said they predicted frenemies would end badly right from the start. It's like they were pulling all this history into the present moment.
Definitely paints a picture of past actions really fueling the fire around that specific situation. The long memory of the internet, I guess.
Absolutely. And some of the descriptions in that thread were intense. People calling Paytas a psychopath during that time, mentioning alleged illegal recording in the client's house.
Yikes.
It also floated that theory that maybe some fans defend or even identify with what seen as toxic behavior, which is an uncomfortable thought.
Yeah, it is.
And then there was that one comment about Paytas' views on childcare versus career after she announced her pregnancy, how some felt it contradicted things she'd said before. Shows how closely everything gets watched.
It really does. Every statement, past and present, gets put under the microscope. Okay, so shifting gears slightly, that Newsweek article from 2020 gives us a snapshot of other big controversies just from that year alone. What stood out there?
Well, Newsweek detailed that huge feud with the D'Amelio sisters and James Charles over that dinner video. Paytas called them entitled and ungrateful.
Oh, I remember that.
But the thing that's wild is the scale of the article says Paytas made over 100 TikToks about just that one fight.
100. Wow. That's a lot of content for one disagreement. Really shows how these things can just snowball online.
Totally. Newsweek also mentioned the falling out with David Dobrik, where Paytas felt like a bad friend, and also defending Shane Dawson after he got canceled, plus that prob-offensive TikTok trend with the Egyptian-style costume that caused a stir.
Right, the cultural appropriation accusations.
And let's not forget Paytas accusing James Charles of being predatory. That was in the Newsweek piece, too. So yeah, 2020 sounds like it was a particularly busy year for controversy.
Yeah, busy is one word for it. Definitely seems like a period marked by a lot of online drama and things that rub people the wrong way. Now, zooming out even further, the Indiana Daily Spaden article looked at controversies from even earlier. What did that cover?
That piece reminds us this isn't exactly a new phenomenon for Paytas.
Yeah.
It brought up things like pretending to be a Japanese pop star, which led to accusations of racism,
Okay.
also accusations of anti-Semitism, and that time they falsely came out as transgender. The article stresses, these weren't youthful mistakes, they were an adult, and these things had an impact.
That's an important distinction. And the article also mentioned a later incident in 2021 where Nikita Dragun, who is a trans woman, called Paytas out publicly.
Oh, right. What was that about?
Apparently, Dragun felt Paytas was trying to sort of erase or minimize the success of the trans community during some argument they were having. So those earlier actions kept having ripple effects.
Exactly. It shows how past online behavior can really stick around and keep influencing how people see you and the relationships you have within online communities.
Which brings us back again to that academic thesis and its take on cancel culture. How did it frame that whole concept?
Well, the thesis looks at cancel culture less as just random online anger and more as a kind of collective action, a way groups try to enforce consequences for behavior they see as unacceptable.
Okay.
And interestingly, it traces the roots of this kind of accountability back to queer communities of color. The argument is that celebrity culture, including online micro-celebrities, becomes this place where society debates morality and norms.
So it's like a public forum for hashing out what's okay and what's not?
Kind of, yeah. And because micro-celebrities like Paytas are constantly putting content out there, they become frequent focal points for this kind of scrutiny.
Makes sense. And the thesis also mentioned that not all cancellations have the same impact, right? Precisely. It notes that sometimes being canceled leads to real-world consequences, losing jobs, major reputation hits, but other times it might just be a temporary dip in followers or views.
Okay.
And in Paytas' case, the thesis suggests that because those initial cancel campaigns didn't perhaps have lasting effects, a part of the YouTube community stepped into this digital vigilante role. Like they started watching even more closely.
Right, that sustained, coordinated response we talked about. And the thesis then used two specific scandals to illustrate this, the GD one and the teacher one.
Yep. Let's start with the DD scandal. What the thesis found there was other YouTubers accusing Paytas of basically clickbaiting by talking about dissociative identity disorder.
Why clickbait?
Well, it came after another creator had success discussing their own genuine experience with Beta D. So the accusation was that Paytas was jumping on a trend, and also that their self-diagnosis wasn't credible and potentially harmed the community. The thesis argues Paytas might have been using sort of inauthentic vlogging about it to get attention, maybe playing up vulnerability, what they called weaponized shame.
Interesting term. But did it work in terms of attention?
Well, what's fascinating is the thesis includes data showing that despite all the backlash, Paytas' subscriber count actually held steady or even grew a bit, around then hitting like 4.94 million in March 2020, and views kept going up.
Wow. So even negative attention was still attention, still fueled growth.
Seems that way. It really highlights how the online attention economy can work, sometimes counterintuitively.
Okay, so what about the other example, the teacher scandal?
Similar pattern, according to the thesis. YouTubers again pointed to what they saw as Paytas' shame-liberty tactics. The big focus there was on Paytas allegedly playing the victim card.
Right.
And other creators were actively trying to debunk Paytas' claims. The thesis even mentions a specific investigative video by someone called Mysterious.
So what was motivating people to scrutinize it so intensely in that case?
The thesis suggests it was mainly about raising awareness of how serious the claims were, and also a feeling that Paytas had kind of broken YouTube's unspoken rules, the social norms of the community. It was like the community policing itself.
Gotcha. Okay, so that covers a lot of the controversy analysis. But things have shifted more recently, right? Some of the later articles talk about changes.
Yeah, definitely. The Lady Gun article, for instance, talks about a noticeable transformation in Paytas' online persona.
What do they think caused that?
They point pretty strongly to the relationship with Moses Hackman, mentioning things like meditation, a more spiritual vibe. And the article notes Paytas has expressed embarrassment about past stuff, even taking down old videos, suggests a conscious effort to change the image.
And the Quinnipiac Chronicle piece kind of echoes that, right? Especially after the birth of her first baby, Malibu, in late 2022.
Exactly. That article highlights Paytas seeming to move away from the damaging online persona, making public apologies, focusing much more on family and motherhood. And of course, she's had 2 more kids since then.
So family life becoming central to the public image now.
Seems to be a big part of the narrative. But then you have the Willistonian article offering a slightly, well, different take.
Oh.
It observes what it sees as Paytas still having this strong need for attention and kind of floats the idea that maybe the controversies actually built the brand.
So this shift might not be entirely separate from brand strategy.
That's sort of the question it raises. Is it all personal growth, or is it also a strategic pivot? The article also suggests the podcast Just Trish might be a way to process things, and that her vulnerability, even when messy, connects with some people.
It's complicated for sure, that parasocial connection again.
Yeah. And amidst all this, the Music Times reminds us the music career is still ongoing. Tracks like I Love You, Jesus, Daddy Issues, those nostalgic covers, it's still happening.
Right, another layer that sometimes gets forgotten.
But then you get the Quark Studio article bringing us back to the criticism. It really emphasizes the history of trolling videos just for views, like that old Why I'm Voting for Mitt Romney one, and stresses the real harm caused by some past stereotypes Paytas used. It's a reminder that for many critics, the past isn't just history.
You see that tension clearly on Reddit too, don't you? Like in the Trisha Paytas thread.
Absolutely. Some users there seem to think past stuff was overblown, maybe seeing Paytas as more of a troll who mainly hurt themselves. But others, even fans, acknowledge the problems but maybe believe she's changed. It's really divided.
A real mix.
But then the Sir Cancelled Pod thread is much more consistently critical. It lists out all these alleged past horrible things.
Right.
And the discussion there is all about accountability, like, can someone like Paytas really be canceled? And comparing her to figures like Tana Mongeau, it shows that for a segment of the internet, forgiveness isn't really on the table.
And that Sir Cancelled Pod thread mentions some really specific serious allegations. We should be clear. These are user claims on Reddit, not verified facts.
Absolutely. That's crucial context.
But things like alleged sexualization of minors, in cosplay on OnlyFans, the OnlyFans content with family members, the whole P story, alleged defense of someone accused of something awful involving a child, and the history of self-diagnosing mental illnesses. It just shows the depths of the negative perception that still exists.
It really does. And finally, there's that Right Opinion YouTube transcript, which sort of recounts the whole frenemies arc, the initial good vibes, Moses coming into the picture, the big blow up.
Yeah.
But it does it without really taking sides on why it ended, which
Right.
fits with how we're trying to just present what the sources say.
Okay, so we've gone through news, Reddit, academia, YouTube analysis.
Mm.
After all that,
Mm.
what's the picture that emerges? It feels incredibly complicated.
It is super complex. You see this long history of courting controversy facing really serious accusations, intense public backlash, but also clearly reported personal change, a definite shift towards family, new projects, and the sources just interpret all this so differently, from academic analysis of shame-leberty tactics to seeing genuine growth, plus that dedicated fan base that sticks around.
Right. It really shows how hard it is to land on one simple narrative when you look at it from all these angles.
Exactly, which kind of leads us to a final thought for you listening. Looking at this whole saga, the evolution, the controversies, the cancel culture dynamics, what does accountability actually look like for online figures? How do you weigh past actions against present changes in this crazy, fast-moving internet landscape? It's definitely something to think about. Probably no easy answers there.